We are bringing you on some walks through different parts of Rome, starting out at Via del Coronari, one of Rome's most famous pedestrian shopping streets. You will find a delightful series of narrow pedestrian lanes that you could investigate for several days. There are cute little side alleys and staircases branching off. They are luring you into their curves, so feel free to wander. More of the furniture dealers, the antique dealers, and the restoration experts at work here. Via del Coronari today has got several dozen art galleries and antique shops. In olden days, 400 years ago, this was the street that led the pilgrims who came afoot from all over Europe to St. Peter's. Here on the Street of the Crowns, that's Coronari, they would purchase rosary beads and other religious paraphernalia in hopes of getting them blessed at the Vatican. Well, these neighborhoods all around are just saturated with charm and character. You'll walk on cobbled pedestrian lanes with apartments upstairs in a pattern that's been followed for about 2,000 years. Though the brick buildings may look picturesquely decrepit, you can be sure these are some of the most expensive quarters in Rome, prized for their central historic location. And there's these cute little side lanes leading off from it. Wouldn't you like to sit down and have a meal there, or stop on the corner and pass some time of day with your neighbor? This is Roman street life at its best, at its most relaxed. This entire neighborhood within the bend of the Tiber River is completely safe and wonderful to explore. You cannot get lost because it is only about 1 square mile, bounded by the river on 3 sides and the busy Via Del Corso on the eastern edge. Walking in this quiet neighborhood will be one of the most interesting experiences of your visit. Continue walking along Via del Coronari and turn right in one of those little narrow alleys that lead in a few minutes towards the Church of Santa Maria della Pace, the heart of yet another precious little neighborhood. Find the intersection with Cafe Pace on the corner and the rounded portico of Santa Maria della Pace at the end of the block. All around you is another charming slice of Roman life, with a small produce stand, ivy-covered buildings, the corner shop, the newsstand, gelato nearby, locals hanging out, and Piazza Navona 2 short blocks away. The small church of Santa Maria della Pace waits for you at the end of the block. Does the curved facade of this church look familiar? It was designed in mid-19th century by Pietro da Cortona and has been copied in many buildings around the world. Be sure to visit the small cloister in back, entered through a door to the left of the church. This charming little cloister plays a role in the architectural history of Rome because it was designed by Bramante, the initial architect of St. Peter's Basilica. And yet this is his very first work in Rome, done when he had just arrived as a young architect. If the church is open, not always a sure thing with its quirky hours, be sure to go inside to enjoy the small space most famous for a Raphael fresco on the upper right side that shows sibyls receiving revelations from an angel. The main nave is set in an octagonal space. Leave Pace via the little alley to the right as you face the church and walk 2 short blocks back to Piazza Navona, the famous outdoor living room of Rome. The Basilica of St. John Lateran is perhaps the second most important church in the entire Catholic world, second to St. Peter's, because this is really the oldest major church, and it's the true home of the Pope, and constructed in the Basilica style, an amazing golden coffered wooden ceiling, beautiful altar with paintings and mosaics all around it. It's really a grand structure. It was first founded way back in the year 324, and the building we see today is the result of various reconstructions built during the Baroque period of the late 16th century. There's also a very serene cloister. You get to walk all the way around the cloister and enjoy the various views. A very quiet and serene place. And there are various wall fragments on display, as well as some tombs and other artifacts and sculptures as you walk around the cloister with a beautiful garden in the center. The columns are these amazing spiral twisted pears. It's well worth the small admission charge you pay to go out into the cloister. And then you return back into the church itself. Various important architects were involved in the final designs of the Baroque structure that we see today, including Carlo Fontana and Giacomo della Porta and Francesco Borromini. Borromini was brought in the late Baroque times to build these architectural niches that hold the giant statues. He didn't carve the statues. They were put in about 100 years later. But he designed these vast architectural niches in his typical concave style with some elaborate geometry to frame it all, making a marvelous composition. There are 2 aisles and the large central nave space, as well as various chapels. It makes a wonderful visit. You do have to travel for maybe 20-30 minutes from the center of town to get here. Perhaps it's easiest to just simply take a taxi, or you can take the metro. When you're done, you walk back out through the St. John Gate, back into the busy streets of the city, and there you could catch a taxi or take the metro right back into the center of town. You can accomplish the entire visit in about 2 hours. Although you might want to spend 2 hours just at the church itself and another half hour to get here and a half hour to get back. So it could take you most of an afternoon. And as you can see, it was well worth it. Trastevere is one of the best neighborhoods for restaurants and for walking and being out among the locals. It's just across the Tiber River from the historic center of Rome. There are numerous little trattorias that abound in the side streets of Trastevere. Piazza Trilussa, this is one of the focal points of Trastevere. This is time for just strolling, eyeballing some restaurant choices. It's a little early for dinner yet, so people are just walking. It's the passeggiata. Trastevere is really a small neighborhood. You can walk through most of it in an hour, maybe 2 hours at most. Continue walking another couple of blocks in from the river over to the Piazza of Santa Maria in Trastevere. This sizable plaza has all the elements you hope for. A spectacular ancient church, a major fountain in the middle, several restaurants with outdoor seating, with locals hanging out, kids running around, adventurous tourists, and some apartments above, one of the loveliest gathering places of the city. Be sure to enter the Church of Santa Maria in Trastevere, one of the oldest in Rome and dating back to the 13th century. Built in the Romanesque style along the lines of an ancient Roman basilica, notice the golden mosaics above the altar, the monolithic columns taken from other ancient monuments, and the coffered wooden ceiling. It was rebuilt several times, and the present structure dates back to about the early 13th century, one of the oldest in Rome, certainly. From the piazza, you can complete your circular walk by walking along Via del Corso back towards the river from whence you came. Coming back across the river from Trastevere, you might want to walk through Campo dei Fiori and check out the action. It's just a few blocks across the river. This is a friendly spot where you could easily strike up a conversation with some relaxed locals if that interests you. Many outdoor restaurants and bars surround this lively piazza and stay busy until quite late. On weekends, it gets especially busy and turns into a big outdoor party. Finally, 2 more piazzas are certainly still busy in the wee hours, Piazza di Spagna and Trevi Fountain, so you could keep walking for another hour or 2 if you had any energy left to burn. There are endless choices for outdoor dining and strolling in this central section of the city. After a great day like this, there is nothing much else that you need to do except return to your hotel and crash. Now take a moment to consider an evening digression. This neighborhood near Via dei Banchi Nuovi and Chiesa Nuova is just filled with interesting streets. You can wander here for hours. Maybe you want to come back to this neighborhood, which is more interesting late in the day when it becomes a magical gathering place for eating, shopping, strolling, and just soaking up the scene. At twilight, the shops are open, the temperatures are nice and cool. A maximum number of stylish locals are out walking through these pedestrian lanes, and the restaurants are beginning to get busy. This is when Rome really comes to life, so come back to this tangle of streets for one of your Roman evenings. During the magical hour of twilight, you might be tempted to just sit down inside a restaurant and have your dinner, but try to postpone that urge and instead take a walk to take advantage of this beautiful lighting with the mix of late sunset, the deep blue sky, the street lamps, and shop lights. One of the great pleasures is just walking in these little alleys and discovering the little piazzas. This neighborhood just behind the Piazza Navona keeps going and going. You can wander for another couple hours in that direction, and you'll run into more action, more activities, things to buy. A few shops are open and some sidewalk stalls will be open, and of course the restaurants and cafes are open right through the early hours, usually 1 a.m., 2 a.m. You can come back here in the evening and it is safe, it's pleasant, there's restaurants here and there. Just this entire neighborhood in the bend of the Tiber River. So just come on in and wander and explore, night or day. People love to live outdoors in Rome. The restaurants are always bustling. You can try and follow a map if you like when you're wandering around here in the center of the city, but you don't really need to. You can just toss that map aside and just wander. Notice the busy pizzeria called Da Buffetto. It's only open from 7 p.m., not open during the day for lunch. It's inexpensive, tasty, and famous for the nightly line of faithful locals and eager tourists patiently waiting for a table to open in the cramped interior. Slightly ridiculous because there are many other good choices all around, including another branch of this same pizzeria 3 blocks away that's much less crowded, near Campo de Fiori on Piazza del Teatro di Pompeo. But Da Buffetto is one of the classic pizza places in town. You might want to give it a try. It's very rewarding in your travels to have some time like this where you can simply walk through these quiet, peaceful residential streets. They're very historic, but they don't have the real headline monuments. It's something that takes you off the beaten track and into the neighborhoods where the actual Romans lived. After strolling for an hour or so in these tangle of wonderful lanes, pick your spot, sit down, and have a great meal Roman style. These sidewalk restaurants make a perfect spot for dinner, good food, and a stream of fascinating people parading by. This surely will be another wonderful highlight of your European experience. Well, let's start out the walk from Largo, Argentina, which is an unusual collection of 4 ancient temples right in the middle of the busy streets, and it's also home to Rome's largest collection of semi-wild cats. They're actually very nicely taken care of in this cat sanctuary of Largo, Argentina. Its temple complex was only discovered during the 1930s when a construction project uncovered them. Here you can clearly see that modern Rome is about 30 feet higher than the ancient ground surface, far below. which makes one wonder what other treasures are still buried beneath the streets of modern Rome. These temples are so old, built more than 2,000 years ago, nobody has any idea what their name was or how they functioned. So they are just labeled temples A, B, C, and D. It must have been an important area because 4 temples stand close together and were apparently used at the same time. Nearly a dozen columns have been resurrected to give you some idea of how it might have looked originally. Ongoing archaeological work continues, searching for more clues about this mysterious site. It's the Church of Il Gesù. It's the mother church of the Jesuit order. The Jesuits were founded just after the Reformation. By 1540, the decor that we see today is from a later period. When the church was initially constructed in the late 1500s, it was built in the Counter-Reformation style, which is the big nave, and that was for preaching, so that they could preach to a large number. Standing, you might have 5,000 people in here very easily, and the acoustics were such that the natural voice could be heard. And then they have the side chapels. And you see the triangular areas below the dome, those 4 corners, those are called the pendentives. They too have got brilliant frescoes painted in there. In each transept we've got important altars. In this case, it is the tomb of Ignatius Loyola. Look at the columns. They are covered with lapis lazuli. This chapel on the right side was designed by the great Pietro da Cortona. A dazzling ceiling mural celebrates the apotheosis of St. Ignatius Loyola with an illusionistic perspective that brings the glories of heaven into the nave and spills onto the walls in trompe-l'oeil brilliance. This is Italian Baroque at its most extreme, with every square inch decorated in marble, gold, and painted fresco. Cross at the corner of Largo, Argentina using the traffic light and crosswalk, which leads in 1 block to a delightful surprise. It's called the Fountain of the Turtles, and you see the turtles on top. And what we've got is life-size young naked guys, and then they're standing on these fish that are spouting out the waters. And it's just a beautiful Renaissance fountain. And all around you, you're looking at some wonderful buildings. These were palaces in the old days. This is called the Piazza Mattei. The small Piazza Mattei was the center of a noble residential complex in the old days during the Renaissance, owned by the Mattei family, with several palaces all around, including one that you can enter, the Palazzo Mattei di Giovi. It features a lovely courtyard surrounded by a double loggia, faced with dozens of classical statues up on the walls. The palace was designed by Carlo Maderno, the last architect of St. Peter's. And nowadays, the palace is home to the Center for American Studies. Exit from Piazza Mattei through the narrow alley at the southeast corner of the square that will soon bring you to Via del Portico d'Ottavia, which is the main road of this small ghetto neighborhood. Today, the ghetto is a classic and typical residential neighborhood. It's kind of a back street with no through traffic, so it's like a little village back here, and you're bound to see locals sitting around, mamas with kids, seniors standing on the corner and talking, or perhaps sitting at one of the small outdoor tables at a cafe along the sidewalk of this charming street. Life here is relished in human-scale neighborhoods like this, where people are happy to pass their time relaxing, sitting, and watching you go by. Towards the end of this block on the left, you'll find one of Rome's excellent restaurants, Gigetto, famous for fried artichokes. That's deep fried in the Jewish style of the Roman Jewish cuisine. They take the whole choke, deep fried, and then you eat the whole thing, skins and all. Oh, do we have porcini mushrooms? Oh, well, that's the real thing. Now you can get that with pasta or as a main dish. The zucchini flower, fiore di zucchini, the yellow flower. Sit indoors or outside next to the impressive Roman ruins, the Portico of Octavia. Portico of Octavia is one of those amazing ancient ruins that pop up seemingly in the middle of a street. It was first constructed in 146 BC and then rebuilt in the 1st century AD by Rome's greatest emperor, Augustus, who dedicated it to his sister, Octavia. It was originally a large rectangular colonnade with 300 columns surrounding 2 temples and adorned with many fabulous works of art. It was maintained and renovated by later emperors, including Septimus Severus and Caracalla. So you can get a picture of. And you've got your columns and your arch, your triangular pediment up there. And they've done a lot of work in recent years to renovate and open it up with these walkways. With a zigzag ramp so you can walk down to get a closer view looking up at the facade. And this walkway continues on to the adjacent Teatro di Marcello if you follow the path for just a minute. Continue with a visit to Teatro di Marcello, just past the Portico of Octavia and easily reached via the new footpath. Teatro Marcello. And in the ancient days, it's like 2,000 years old. It was a theater. It held 20,000 people, and it's a place to come to see drama, poetry readings, festivals. There'd be some songs and such in there. It's been modified a little bit. You see, there's 3 levels of the theater. The top layer has been removed and replaced by apartments. People live there today, some very wealthy, noble families. We're looking at the outside of the theater. And so the seats would have been on the inside, and then the stage would have been beyond that. We frequently upload new movies, so please subscribe to our channel and click that little alarm bell so you'll be notified. And if you enjoyed the movie, how about a thumbs up? And we always welcome comments down below. Or if you have questions about the destination, make note and we'll answer them. Thanks for watching.